Just for the record, I got a link.
Okay, that's good to know. And Peter is back. Yeah, I usually like to give people till 2:05, which it is now, but let's give them a couple more minutes just in case. What on earth am I looking at here? Hi, Peter. And hi, John. You finally clicked over. You're on. I imagine John has some goofy internet because you're up in deep woods, Wisconsin somewhere, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So I went to a different place where I can stream you guys without I shouldn't have any problem.
Okay.
And it's good to see you all.
Good to see you. Give everybody just a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I just ended up registering today. I don't think I probably I had emails too. I can't even remember whether I clicked on the email link or went to the website, but either way, I'm here.
Give everybody about one more minute and then we'll just let people in as they come.
Great.
All right, well, I've got 2:07, so we may as well start rolling.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right.
Welcome, everyone, to Folk Alliance Region Midwest Virtual Connections Tech Talk Tuesday or something. I think we have a new name for these, and we'll put that on the next one or the next one. But I'm Alexa Dawson. I want to just thank everyone for being here, especially Lizzie No, Matt Wachroba, and also I'm just like, now that I'm talking, and her face went away. I can't read her.
Oh, my co-host
I'm
Cindy
sorry,
House.
Cindy
There
House.
she is.
There you are. Thank you so much, Cindy. I apologize. Anyway, I wanted to tell everyone who's here a couple of things about what's going on with Farm right now. Tomorrow is our folk DJ peer group. If you don't know about our peer groups, go visit our virtual connections page on our website, and that's where you'll find out about our peer sessions and also about Performance Lane, which is happening on Thursday. For all those details and for the Zoom links, go to our website. As you know, conference registration is now open, and there are a couple of things that are happening with that. We're still in the planning stages, so our workshop programming is still kind of wide open. So if you have ideas about a workshop or a panel or something that you would like to see happen at the farm gathering in October, please let us know, and we will do our best to make sure that those ideas are heard. Also, we are accepting award nominations currently, and also if you would like to be a private showcase host, that information is going out now. So it's a good time to make sure that you are registered if you're not already, and then start making plans because October will be right around the corner. And now I'm just going to turn it over to Charlie.
Thank you, Alexa. I'm going to make us four. Well, good afternoon and welcome to our panel conversation in our Tech Tuesday for Virtual Connections. This month we are having a conversation. It's about podcasts, and we are joined by Matt Wachroba, Lizzie No, and Cindy House. I'm looking forward to this. I have quite a few questions. So, by the way, my name is Charlie Mossbrook. I don't even know if I said that or if Alexa gave you the full. I am the current board president for Folk Alliance Region Midwest. and it's good to be here today. So let's just get started with our conversation. I'm just going to throw this out to the three of you, and each we could start with Matt and then just pass it around, or however we want to do it. But how would you what is a podcast? How would we define a podcast?
Well, it's a podcast is unique in so many ways, and as I was telling my esteemed co-guests here, I in no way consider myself an expert in this area. This was something that seemed to be a potential way to put together a whole bunch of skills that I have and get it out there in a way that, so I entered this thing not knowing anything at all about them. But a podcast is a way to get information out to people through an RSS feed that they can listen to whenever they want to. So, and for free, and really, really easily access. So they can get, anybody with an iPhone probably already has Apple Podcast on their phone to hear my podcast or Basic Folk. It literally takes 2 clicks of your finger. And I've never seen anything, in my own opinion, with the potential of getting whatever it is you want to get out there to as many people as possible than that. I mean, I've done radio my whole life. I've worked with Folk Alley Internet Radio. I've worked with Sirius. I've worked with all these different things. But to me, there's nothing this customizable and this accessible than this idea that anything you create can be up and running within 24 hours and out to the people who subscribe. It's so to me, it's really a kind of a really instant way to communicate with a whole bunch of people.
Power to the people.
Yes.
Yeah, it's I think when they first invented radio, it was supposed to be kind of like a podcast situation where it was a two-way radio. So ham radio operators talk to each other all the time, but that was the original form of radio, and it really put the power in the hands of regular people, and then that quickly got taken away in form of terrestrial radio. But podcasting, it's kind of like it's doing what internet blogs did to magazines and newspapers. It's putting the hands back into ordinary people who have something that they want to say through the medium of podcasting. I think what Matt said was right on.
I don't have much to add there. I feel like those are some really good angles to look at podcasts from, but I would just add that what I find interesting about podcasts is the way you can do what you might do on live radio, but there's a little bit of a remove of time and a moment to edit and a moment to creatively shape the narrative. So you can have really in-depth conversations, you can have scripted shows, you can have radio dramas, everything that you would get on the radio, but a little bit of extra time to sit with it and make decisions about what you want to share with your audience.
Creatively shape the program. I like that. That's really descriptive of something that can be done within the production. I realized I am the one person in this group who is not a podcaster, and as a result, I forgot to even introduce our panel properly. So let me begin with Lizzie. Lizzie No, with the release of her debut album Hard Won in 2017, singer-songwriter, harpist, and guitarist Lizzie No established herself as one of the most exciting new voices in indie folk music. Billboard magazine called the album simultaneously understated and fervent. She followed up the album with a release of Sundown, a benefit track for Black Lives Matter. In 2021, Lizzie joined Basic Folk, the Basic Folk podcast, as a co-host, appearing monthly on the podcast. And since her debut, she's interviewed Valerie June, Will Sheff, Okkervil River, Brent Cobb, Amethyst Ka, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, Molly Tuttle, I know I pronounced that correctly, Kishi Bashi,
Kishibashi.
SG Goodman, and many more. I probably should have stuck with many more once my pronunciation became. And Lizzie lives you're in Brooklyn.
That's true.
here in Brooklyn. Also, Matt Watroba. He is living in our farm region. Matt Watroba is a popular radio host and producer, as a writer, and as a sought-after performer and community song leader. His podcast, No Root, where is it? No Root, No Fruit. Did I say that correctly?
No
You
root, no
did.
fruit.
I did. Okay. His podcast was inevitable. Matt has interviewed hundreds of folk and roots music performers over the years. He has produced thousands of hours of broadcast radio, including syndicated shows for Sirius XM, Sing Out, Folk Alley, Folk Music Notebook, and he continues his local radio work with WKAR out of Michigan State Public Media in East Lansing, Michigan. And with Folk with Matt Watroba, a 3-hour folk show on Sunday nights starting at 6 p.m. He is also the co-founder of the Detroit nonprofit Common Chords, an organization devoted to using music and art to tear down the walls that divide us. He co-created this with his decades-old musical partner and friend, Reverend Robert Jones. Matt is also, he was selected for the Folk DJ Hall of Fame in 2019 by Folk Alliance International. He's a recipient of Farm Zone Lantern Award, Lantern Bearer Award, and he is an outstanding folk performer according with the Detroit Music Awards.
Wow.
That's Matt Watroba. Very, very. And then Cindy House is passionately motivated to connect communities through meaningful music. Based in the Boston area, she grew up in suburban Massachusetts with a relentless passion of music and broadcasting that all began with a clock radio stuck on the 90s top 40 station in Boston. A fierce folk music advocate for over 2 decades, she began broadcasting at just 14 at Walpole High School. Please correct me when I don't say things correctly. High school's 10-watt radio station. This led her to seek a degree in media arts at Emerson College, driven to secure a place in WERS's hallowed airwaves. Cindy ended up hosting and running the station's folk program, The Coffee House, for most of her tenure at Emerson. Her resume includes WBOS, WBUR, WBZ, WYEP. She spent 10 years at WYEP hosting the morning mix and then the evening mix. Since 2014, she's been hosting online at Folk Alley, an online radio station that's part of the Fresh Grass Foundation, which joyfully connected her with folk music. Again, Folk Alley, WYEP, and WERS are public radio stations deeply involved in community and advocating for music fans and musicians alike. Cindy has thrived at this intersection and knows how to bring music fans and music creators together in many different ways. And that's who we are listening to today. So welcome, everybody, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
And now that we know what a podcast and we know who you are, is how do we get into podcasting? How do we? So we've got the show that we can creatively. What was the word you just used, Lizzie?
I don't know. I would recommend not listening too closely to anything that I say because I might go back on it.
That's good. It's good to evolve. So, Matt, do you want to start with that? How did you get into podcasting? How did you find the resources to do so?
Well, there's a couple of different things in that question. To me, the very first thing you need is a good idea. When I heard there was something like 3 million podcasts out there currently, my first thought was don't do it unless you could come up with something that other people aren't doing. You know, I wasn't really interested in competing at too much of a level, since you heard I do a lot of stuff. So to me, what drives the reason to do a podcast or not do a podcast is the idea. And I think I don't know what I'm not quite sure where we've taken this, but I have this feeling that we haven't even scratched the surface as to sort of looking outside the box as to how we can take this idea of instant communication in all kinds of ways, especially with what seems to be sort of not the demise, but the diminishing of terrestrial radio. You know, it's just that the numbers are just not there. The podcast seems to be the new radio to me. And And so first it's get an idea. Now, one of the things that makes it different, and I'd love to hear from Cindy about this, is, you can't just do a radio program as a podcast without paying lots and lots of fees to do that, to use the music that you're using. So you have to think creatively right away, because you can't just do a radio program unless you're doing all original music that you own the copyright for. So I got into this because of a podcast I was listening to. And I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but this one called Cocaine and Rhinestones really got my attention. A, because it was on a subject I like a lot, which is old time country music. And B, because it was just so impeccably researched by this host, Tyler Mahan Coe, who was the son of David Allan Coe, the country singer. And so that was my introduction to podcasts, was what Tyler was doing. And I was intrigued by it. Now, knowing what I know about radio, he must work on this thing 18 hours a day to do the kind of research that, I saw. And I knew I didn't have that kind of commitment. So I just started thinking about what could I do? And so the idea I came up with started because of a conversation starter I use whenever I'm in the green room with a bunch of other musicians. I ask them the question, what was the album that got you into this music? What was the influential record that made? And the conversations got so lively that I thought, there's my podcast. I'm gonna pick iconic records from folk roots and Americana music, and I'm gonna interview someone who's really passionate about that record. I'll do the research, do a little track by track, end with the interview. And I didn't see anything else like that on there. So that's when I decided to do it. Of those 3 million podcasts, I'm making these numbers up now, many, many, many of them are just people talking off the cuff and laughing at each other's jokes, like morning radio, I knew it couldn't be that. So yeah, my show ended up being highly written, curated, produced. It takes me about 20 hours a week to put one of these things together, because I take different, elements from all different interviews. I do a new interview. Sometimes I use some of my archival stuff, and then I do the research on the record. Some of them are more easier than others because I have a connection to them in some way, but they're about 20 hours a week work for me. So I have to take that into consideration too. But I got into it because of Tyler, and I got into it because it seemed like it was a way to sort of bring together what I think of as my unique talents as a producer, as a host, and as a lover of this music, and someone who's pretty connected to the world too of folk music. So that helps. That my Rolodex, do you know what that is? That my Rolodex is getting pretty heavy because I've made a lot of contacts over the 30 or so years that I've done this.
Mine is buried under my BlackBerry. I'm sorry.
I echo all that Matt said, and I would also add that once you have your idea, if you know anybody who does podcasting, hit them up for any and all advice they can offer. I was lucky enough to have a friend who worked in podcasting, and we talked about different distribution platforms, which the one that I would recommend is actually one that's based right here in Pittsburgh. It's called Libsyn. It is a distribution platform that makes it really, really easy for users, podcasters, to get their show out on Spotify, Apple Podcast, TuneIn, Stitcher, every single podcast platform. So there are many, many out there. I started on Libsyn, and I think it's a great company. They have different pricing plans. I think when I was looking at it, it was like $5 a month to podcast, and you could get a certain amount of time. Basic Folk is about an hour long, so I ran out of time pretty quickly, so I had to go to like $20 a month. But Basic Folk has been on a couple of different platforms. Libsyn is the one I would recommend for anybody who is just starting out. It's Libsyn, I believe.
I put it in the chat, Cindy.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lizzie. Very helpful people. And I think, researching through platforms like Libsyn about like what you do when you start your first podcast. I think also maybe like writing an outline of what the show is going to look like to start off with. Figure out what kind of recording situation you want to have if you're going to have people on. Are you going to interview them in person? Are you going to interview them remotely? Do you want to interview people over Zoom? And are you okay with the quality of Zoom audio recordings? If you're not, you could do something called a tape sync where, the person that you're interviewing records themselves, their voice, you record your voice, you stitch it together. I can share instructions on how to do that afterwards if anyone is interested. I think it's a very helpful skill to have if you want to do a podcast
Mhm.
with other guests on. What else? If you want to edit your audio at all, are you going to use GarageBand on your computer? Do you know how to do any kind of audio production? I think GarageBand is pretty great if that's what you have to use. There's also a program called Audacity that's free. On Basic Folk, we use Adobe Audition, which I think is the best audio software editing tool for radio. A lot of people like Pro Tools. I think it's a little too complicated. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
I'm just noting a lot of the specific tech stuff that Cindy is mentioning because it can be really helpful. Cindy was my intro and mentor in podcasting. I never thought that I wanted to interview people in an audio format. And that kind of goes to my opinion on, how and why to get into podcasting. I still wrestle with the idea, with the question of whether or not it's worth it to record conversations and share them publicly. Obviously, I'm currently on the side of yes, it is worth it.
Thank God.
But I think that tension and that skepticism hopefully makes me a better interviewer because, like Matt mentioned, there are millions of podcasts out there. And if you're not asking yourself, what am I adding? Then you might just be adding to the noise. And I was a guest on Cindy's podcast. I'm a singer-songwriter. And I noticed right away that she was, in a class above a lot of other journalists or podcasters that, God bless everyone that's, interviewing musicians. But I just noticed that Cindy was really doing her research. She had insightful questions and she was drawing conversation out of me that I hadn't previously had the opportunity to share. That is so important in music and really in any field. Like, are you asking questions that other people aren't asking? The way to find that out is to really do your research and see what the artist has talked about in previous interviews. The other thing that Matt's comments made me think about is that, like, coming from the roots and alternative country world, which is where I've, gotten my start as a singer-songwriter, I actually feel like radio is extremely important still, way more so than my friends that work in other genres. As country music especially is really radio centric, and it's a problem because most country radio is a part of the problem of why people see country music as so sexist and so racist and so anti-Indigenous. There is a ton of power in commercial radio, and the types of conversations that they're having on those stations are making everything worse because they're talking about men and what men have to say, and that's pretty much it. So if you're able to come at it from another angle of, like, we are specifically curious about what women are doing. We are specifically curious about how Indigenous artists are engaging with the idea of Americana. We are very curious about how Black artists are changing the roots and blues scene. Like, we can bring our own interests and point of view into this format that can be way too homogenous. So that's like my entree into podcasting. And I'm so grateful that, like, Cindy is not only an ally, but like someone that's pushing those conversations forward.
I think all of that is just so great. And so I would just want to add on to one thing that Lizzie just said, which is she just danced around it. But the truth is, the more you know your audience, like I actually have a compiled sketch of who's listening to my podcast. I kind of have their age, their sex, I try to be as specific as I can because podcasting is even more intimate than radio is. People listen in their earphones. They listen while they're jogging, while they're working. We're right in their ear. So I like to have a real clear feeling of who it is I'm talking to. And I think that really focuses the podcast. Just like you said, if, I think that's really true.
Great idea, Matt. I love that.
It's a really good idea.
So I guess my next question, so content seems to be your biggest investment, based on the amount of research time everybody's talked about. But the next investment obviously is gear. And both Matt and Cindy, you've been in radio for years, so I'm guessing that you have a microphone at home. And Cindy reflected on some of the software she's been using. But what softwares do you use? What microphones? What kind of interfaces? So this is a question for the two of you coming from that radio background, and then for Lizzie, coming from a background where you didn't have experience in radio and you were coming on and you're in a remote location from where Cindy is. What kind of things did you need to get involved to make this work for you? And let's let Cindy start.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm using an Audio Technica mic that's plugged into a USB board that I plug right into my computer. The mic sounds really good. The board is like nothing fancy. I got it from Sweetwater, which is I'm sure people know that company. You buy one thing and then they call you for like 25 years to buy more things, and it's always the same guy. My first mic that I started podcasting on was a Blue Yeti mic, which are great. It's a USB mic. I would recommend a pop filter. This is an old kind of raggedy pop filter. So a pop filter can either be this or what Matt has actually. You can just stick on a styrofoam, and then you can get one specifically made for your microphone. Lizzie and I also have a little Shure microphone. I think it's called an MV88 that I actually saw Kelly McCartney using when we were recording a DJ set together. And I basically, I don't know if that's stealing an idea when you like decide to like copy someone's microphone, but I got us both these Shure MV88s that stick right into your iPhone, and you can change the direction that you're recording in. So you can either record yourself or you can record two people. I have an audio degree, but like the directions of things, you can do the like figure 8. What is that? Mono bi-directional. Anyways, it's a really good microphone. And that's really awesome and easy if you're on the go, like Lizzie uses it on tour. I'll use it for in-person interviews, or if I'm going on a trip, it's so much easier to pack than the Yeti. And then again, I'm Adobe Audition all the way.
Matt?
Yeah, I would. One of the advantages and one of the reasons I got into this is because I already did have all the equipment that I needed to do it. So that was one expense that I didn't have to worry about because I do my radio program from home. So I already have the software and I think I got this particular mic, which is an Audio Technica RE20, because it's from nostalgic reasons. I think it's the kind of microphone I've had in every radio station I've ever been in. So I figured I'm not a gearhead at all, but I figured if it's good for 90% of the radio stations I've worked for, it's probably a pretty good mic. Now, the only problem with this mic is it also requires a booster. So this one you can't just plug right in. There's this little thing Sweetwater sold me called a Cloud Lift, which works as a preamp, and it boosts the signal because this mic in and of itself isn't enough, but now it's plenty enough. I also have a warm audio mic that I use that's omnidirectional that I use for performing on Zoom and on, when I'm on, but this mic seems to be great for broadcast for me. And different mics are better for different voices. If you have a salesman at Sweetwater, which I recommend too, I recommend my friend Alan Finkbeiner, married to Jan Christ, one of our great singer-songwriters, but Alan is such an expert at matching voices to mics. Those guys really know what they're talking about. Find if you have a bassy voice, there's a mic that is probably better for your voice. So, I do know this, if you're going to invest in one thing, the way you sound is probably the most important. I think any studio would tell a musician that as well, right? That you're only as good as the microphone. So yeah, you want to sort of invest. This is probably a $500 mic
Mhm.
Not crazy. You could get crazy. The warm audio I have is only $300. So they're not that bad, but that's for some that could be prohibitive. I don't know. I use just a Focusrite to go into the computer. I don't use a board because I very rarely interview people in my studio. I do most of my stuff because it started during the pandemic over Zoom, or if I'm on the radio or if I'm on the road, I have a little Zoom. It was Zoom before Zoom was Zoom, a little Zoom digital recorder that I use
Yes.
with one of those little cross, stereo mics on it. And that seems to work just fine for, like I'm taking off this weekend to play the Old Songs Festival in Albany, and I'd love to get some interviews while I'm there. So I'll just bring my little Zoom microphone, or my little Zoom, which is about that big. It's not that very big. What else? I use Adobe Audition as well. That's probably one cost I could get rid of because Audacity is free. Most people have GarageBand. I've just always used it, and I'm just real comfortable with it. Just like Cindy said, you're going to want to go with the software that you have the easiest time using because you spend a lot of time on it, and if Pro Tools is complicated, skip it. There's a million things that do just what Pro Tools does. And the truth is, when we're dealing with podcasts, we're not dealing with high-end sound. We're dealing with MP3s. That's what you send in to an RSS feed. Nothing more fancier than a high quality MP3. So, you don't really need to get that fancy when it comes to audio. But the signal needs to be good and the mic needs to be good. So you have a good mic, you have a good way to get it to your computer, Focusrite, something like that. I think a good studio monitor, you might have to pay a little bit for that as well, just so you can actually hear what it's going to sound like, not through your computer, but through a pretty good pair of speakers. And you're good to go. I have little JBLs. I'm not sure, but I also got them from Sweetwater. I'm a big Sweetwater fan. Their customer service is really good, and they always send you candy when you get equipment. So my wife likes that especially.
I never got any candy. What the
Really?
heck?
Oh, you got to switch to Alan.
I need
Okay.
to put more bit of honey in those bags.
Okay. I also
ta-
want to
let-
advocate for the iPhone mic. When we do tape syncs, often guests
Sure.
are just taping themselves on their iPhone mic, which some people who are very, very sensitive to listening to audio, like if you're an audio producer or a musician, you might be able to tell that it gets a little bit compressed. But I feel like podcast listeners are so forgiving when it comes to the quality of the audio that they're listening to. If anyone has ever listened to a murder podcast,
Yes.
or that season of Serial where they used that Bird Dog's cell phone recording the whole time. Like if
Mhm.
you can listen to season 2 of Serial, then you can listen to somebody doing an interview on their iPhone mic.
Yeah, that we have really nice equipment in our pockets at all time. It's really true. But for instance, it all depends too on how you're doing it. I'm batting around an idea for a podcast right now that I'm thinking about doing with my lifelong friend and musical partner, the Reverend Robert Jones. We spend a lot of time in cars together, and we have these amazing conversations. And I always thought, wouldn't it be fun to record some of the stuff we talk about? So, but how would you do that technically? And I think we've settled on 2 lavalier mics that
Mhm.
will just clip to our clothes. We don't mind there being a little road noise or an interruption by the GPS. That'll be part of the charm. And we talk from everything from banjos to revelations, when we're on those trips. So
That also brings to mind, Matt, that the car is actually a really good place to
Mhm.
record because it's padded on the inside. So you also have to think of where you're recording yourself. Right now I'm in like a little like cloth diorama thing that makes it like dampens the room sound so much that it sounds like I'm in a studio practically. It's not soundproof, but there is this great YouTube tutorial of this young Australian man who shows you how you can take one of those IKEA storage boxes and
Mhm.
an egg crate and make like a little tiny mic booth for yourself. And it just makes a world of difference.
I also kept in mind when I bought my equipment that I would sometimes have to do this from a hotel room. So that kind of stuff comes really in handy because when I'm touring for 2 or 3 weeks, I still have to crank this thing out. I'll make a little makeshift studio at the Holiday Inn or whatever
Mhm.
sometimes as well.
I have made
The
some
makeshift-
closet booths that would frighten you.
So Lizzie, coming into it fresh, not coming from that long career of radio, what kind of things did you first gravitate towards equipment wise?
I basically used the same mics that I would use to demo songs. I think the Shure MV88 is great. I had these, Audio-Technica headphones. That's really it because I'm not producing the episodes. So Cindy can definitely speak in more detail about gear. But yeah, being able to record on my iPhone is game changing because I can do it from the road and then send in audio. And a lot of our guests are also on tour while they record their interviews. So you end up being a little bit of like a remote coach because often someone will hop on Zoom, and they're in the middle of a huge tour. So they don't necessarily have time to like get into a recording studio or do a ton of prep. And so you kind of look around like, do you have headphones? What can you use in your space to make this recording work?
And then on the other side of that question, this is for you and Cindy. When you're working remotely from one another, what kind of software or platform are you using for the show when you're co-hosting, not just interviewing a guest who may be on their phone or something like that, but how do you personally coordinate that? Liz or Cindy, I think, alluded to it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so we record the exact same way as we would record with our guests. What we do for the tape sync, I can explain it, and then if anyone wants a PDF of instructions, I'm more than happy to share. So what happens is that we get on Zoom together. We both have headphones on that are connected to our Zoom device. So like right now I'm on my computer, so my headphones are hooked up to my computer. And then I will take my mic and record from my mic, or if I was recording on my phone, I would just record my voice on my phone. And then at the end of our recording session, I would stop it. Lizzie would send me her voice, and then we'd stitch them together in Adobe Audition or Audacity or GarageBand or however you want to do it. But we connect on Zoom, but we record on our own devices. And then Lizzie will send me her audio, and then we edit it together. And it sounds a lot better than a Zoom audio recording, even if you are using, I don't know, this is just my opinion. Even if you are using a microphone, like right now, my mic is actually connected to the Zoom, and it sounds better than if I was just using my earbuds or whatever. But there is interference, there is skipping on Zoom, and I just find it much more reliable for a guest to record their own audio. And then sometimes I will record the backup on Zoom and use that if needed, which we have needed in the past. But when it's me and Lizzie, I don't tend to record the Zoom because we both basically know what we're doing. Basically, yeah.
All right, Matt, do you have any? Because you have guests. I remember listening to Andrew Calhoun on your program. Do you do a similar type of production?
I would. I think what Cindy says is absolutely smart to do, but I don't. So I just rely on Zoom, and luckily,
Totally
mostly what I'm doing is interviewing musicians who have really good rigs and mics. So far I haven't run into any trouble with the sound. Every once in a while they'll call me and I can tell they're just using their computer mic, and I'll just say, hey, do you have something better? And they always do. And so far that's pretty good. And sometimes there is that little, sound that happens in Zoom. And I just figure that's the cost of doing business because I can't add more time.
Totally.
To my process.
Joe Pug's working songwriter. He talks to people on the phone.
Yeah.
So it's like a phone recording.
And again, there's charm in all that. Remember, we're creating this isn't a perfect radio studio. It's a podcast. And I think people like the idea that these are just friends chatting about something we all love. And that can sometimes happen on a phone. Like I said, there's going to be car noise when Robert and I record our conversation because we're in a car. And I might even simulate a car sound when we're doing it in the studio. I don't know, but because I like the idea of on the road. I like the
Mhm.
idea of on the way to the gig with Matt and Robert.
Again, I got to say, one of my favorite parts of the Running on Empty album is that you can hear the bus engine underneath some of the songs.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It lends a certain charm. Well, let's move into promotion and monetization.
Oh,
Okay. I'll do
So-
listen. I'll listen here.
Okay.
do it.
So I've seen you out there promoting that. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's, I could do a lot better. I am not the most connected social media guy because my brain can only do so many screen hours a day,
Mhm.
and if I were to hire one person, it would be for that, if I could afford to. Right now, it's basically I started a Facebook group which has 600 people or so in it, over 600 people in it, and they're very devoted and they're very fun, and I love going on there and talking to them and stuff. But I have not gone into Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or any of that stuff, and I really plan to, and I will. Here's the way I thought about it. I did season 1 on spec because I wanted to see what it would take and if it was a good idea. So I thought, I'll give 12 episodes a shot. And, and I had thousands and thousands of people download it. So I thought, so it's a good idea. People want to hear it. And I love doing it, but I can't do it for free. So so in order to do the second season, I went on and did a Kickstarter campaign and raised $6,000 to do the second season. And this is a one-man show. I host, produce, write, everything, right? And the idea was that I would explore grants and other sources for the third season, but that's a full-time job too,
Mhm.
it turns out. So I don't know if I'll do another Kickstarter. I'll have to figure out. Plus, I do take donations on the website. I have started a Patreon page, which brings in about almost $300 a month, which isn't even close to what I need to do it, but it's really nice. And they're devoted people giving $5, $10, $15 a month. So I'm approaching it from several levels. Having spent my entire life in public radio, I might do a I might do a fund drive like I have. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of the people who listen to my podcast understand how public radio works. And I want this available to everyone. And I know not everyone can pay for it. And I know that I have the kind of listeners who, if they can pay for it, they don't mind paying for the people who can't pay for it. Isn't that public radio in a nutshell right there? Yeah. So I think so far I've been pretty successful building on that model. I have not gone to advertisements yet. I use, by the way, you use Libsyn, I use Buzzsprout.
Mhm.
Have you heard of that one?
I don't think so.
No.
That's the way I distribute it. Everything you said about Libsyn is true about Buzzsprout. They're only about
Oh,
$12
great.
a month for what I need. My podcast is between 30 and 50 minutes, and I come out every other week. They are extremely supportive. That I send them. Someone on the chat asked about an RSS feed. How do you get it out there? That's the job of Libsyn and Buzzsprout. I don't
Mhm.
worry about. All I send them is my MP3, and they do all that. They convert it, they send it out to all the different places. So you don't have to really know too much technically about how the podcast goes out, because that's why you hire that service. Would you say that's true, Cindy? Would you say
Oh,
that's
yeah.
true, Liz?
I did a podcast in 2006 before any of these distribution platforms were around. And I had a friend who was a coder, and she sat there and hand coded
Wow.
the XML code.
Whoa.
And I had to update it. I had to upload my MP3 every week to my website and then put it in the RSS feed. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot better now.
Yeah. This
Wow,
is
hacker stuff.
This is and this
hacker.
now it's like no brainer to do it.
Yeah.
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 And the other thing I would say, and this I got from Tyler Mahenko, who does the Cocaine and Rhinestone podcast, and it's true. I mean, he kind of uses it as an effect. At the end, he says, just tell one person that
Mhm.
likes this kind of music. Tell somebody that would like this podcast. I think word of mouth is by far the best thing you can possibly do. Get those people who are already devotees of the show and say, just tell some folks, tell your friends how easy it is to do this. And you'll start to increase a lot. I think that to me is the cheapest way you can get it out there right away.
Mhm.
Ask the people who already like you.
The only thing I would add is don't worry about it. You're not going to make money on your podcast. You should do it because you enjoy it.
Mhm.
Right.
And you should market it however you want to market it. If you don't want to market it to anyone, then don't. If you don't want to use social media, then don't. If you don't want to do a newsletter, it's fine. If you're just like loving making a podcast, great. If it's like your hobby, it's what you want to spend a couple $100 on, it's awesome. If you want to learn something new, it is a grind to put it
Mhm.
out. Matt, I can't believe you spend 20 hours on each episode. That's amazing.
Mhm.
We have on every episode of Basic Folk, we have probably 2 to 3 people working on it, and I think it probably takes about 12 hours each episode. Yeah, I like
Mine is highly edited. I do a lot of
Mhm.
editing where,
Yeah.
where you guys probably don't have to do as much because you're
Mhm.
you're
It's
doing this
interview.
long conversation
Mhm.
form.
yeah.
I want
Yeah,
to say that
that's-
Cindy's been very creative about fundraising, without having to, let Monsanto sponsor our podcast.
Yeah.
I
Like
said
doing
no.
doing doing promotions that really let people feel like they're not only supporting the podcast but getting on the inside of our ongoing conversation, I think, is a good way to look at it. Cindy's mom is a knitter and she volunteers her time to make Basic Folk beanies. So it's like you're getting a gift from Cindy's mom if you support the podcast. We have t-shirts with Cindy's cat on them that people will, people who listen to the podcast know about the cat,
We
things
did
like that.
a hotties calendar.
We do.
last
We
year.
did it's kind of like in the format of like a hot fireman calendar, but it was all folk artists. And my partner is a designer and made that calendar. So we do definitely lean on our families and community to help us get the word out and help us come up with like creative ways to bring people in. I am very much an Instagram girly. I am on Instagram all the time. I have found that any vertical video will reach 10 times as many people as any image. So if you are recording your podcast on Zoom, you already have a video of the interview. And if you're able to edit a 30-second clip of maybe the guest telling a joke, maybe even just you introducing the guest, video with people's faces always reaches a ton of people. So if you can take any kind of video clip, or if you've met the guest in person, and literally you could just take a video of you shaking hands with your guest or a selfie, anything like that to promote the episode always brings more eyes on social media than an image alone or text alone. So that's something that I've found. When we have the time to like grab a little video clip, it always helps.
That's great to know. Thanks, Lizzie.
Mhm. Sure. And also sharing in your stories as well as sharing on your grid tends to bring in some more engagement.
Lizzie, maybe I should have you run the social media.
I would love to.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing
Great.
too.
I just got promoted.
because I use these iconic albums from these iconic
Mhm.
artists. I'll go on, I'll see my numbers go crazy when I go to those fan pages and ask permission if I can say, hey, I just did a John Hartford thing
Right.
and I want to go on the Fans of John Hartford group, which has 3,000 people in it,
Mhm.
and just tell them that I just did this episode. Would you mind? I have not been turned down once, and it's made a huge difference. Just, trying to figure out who would be interested in this particular episode.
Right. The good thing is that like we're talking about music, and even if you're like just an upstart new podcast, chances are the musicians you're interviewing or the musicians you're talking about have their own fans who would love to hear more information or a deep dive into this artist. So like whenever we put out an episode, Cindy sends out a marketing brief to the artist and their management. Like, here's a quote you can share from the interview. Here's a link to the podcast.
Right.
Here's an image we've created of the artist's face with our logo on it. So like we can get that cross promotion.
Boy, Mary Gaucher was really
Mhm.
good about doing that with me.
Yes.
And it really made a big difference. It really did. So,
Mhm.
and I think too, it's like, we haven't talked about this, but I'm not really big on advertising, but I would do a trade with someone who is
Sure.
doing a similar, like if I went on Basic Folk and Basic Folk, I'd be happy to plug another like-minded, well-done podcast. I get worried with Buzzsprout. They will send you these other podcasts that will give you a small amount of money to promote their podcast on your podcast, but they were awful. I mean,
No.
they didn't sound good. They didn't have anything to do with folk music. But would I do that with somebody like these guys? Absolutely, that could be another way. So we'll talk.
Oh, that's
Right on. The
That's
deal
so
is
nice to
sealed.
hear.
Yeah.
Those are always
Well, this
really
is a
good
small-
when you do a cross post with someone you like what they're up to and
Yeah.
and you respect. Like it's a way of building the folk community.
That's the thing.
It's not
yeah.
just advertising.
That's the thing about our fans. This is a small, the folk music community is a small thing. It's not even a piece of the pie
Yeah.
of the music business. And I think whatever we do in this world lifts everybody up.
Mhm.
It's like that. And to me, that's the attitude I think we need to have in our little world, in order to survive.
On that note, is there a decent, I don't know, website or place in Google where they're aggregating these podcasts, so I know that I can, if I find No Fruit or Basic Folk, these are going to be good programs? Is anybody doing something like that?
Like a Netflix for podcasts.
Sort of a Netflix,
Good
but
idea.
Should
or
we start it, Charlie?
yeah, let's do it.
That's a
Okay.
great idea, really. Right now you could, if you go in and search within, say, Apple Podcasts, folk music, you're going to get anything that uses those, that kind of stuff. And what are we restricted to an hour here?
No, we go to 3:15. It's our
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Because one thing I'd like to talk about is I'd like to send it out to the beehive here as to
Mhm.
how we can expand and go in different direction and use podcasts in different ways if we get a chance
So
to.
why don't we go to a gallery view so everybody, and then if people
Mhm.
have great ideas, they can put up their hand. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
There we go. Everybody's on board.
I still see the same, but let me go.
Oh, do you?
I'll go to
Oh,
gallery.
that was my view. I'm sorry. Okay.
There they are. I only say that because I'm going to put on a couple different hats here. So as a folk radio DJ, there's this new phenomenon right now, and I know Cindy knows what I'm talking about, where we're getting singles, right? It used to be we just get albums in the mail, we get CDs in the mail, and now people are putting out singles by the thousands. It's like I get hundreds of them a month. Which is really, for me, hard to keep track of. I don't know if they're going to be part of a bigger record. It's just kind of a new trend in what musicians are doing. I'm wondering if podcasts could be a way to distribute your own music. Can you imagine just doing every other week, releasing 3 of your songs and talking about why you wrote them? You're going to reach more people than you would through terrestrial radio that way. I don't
Somebody
know
did
anybody
that.
doing that really.
Somebody did that. It was like a song a day for a year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was a folk musician.
That I feel like that's sort of happening on
Oh, here it is.
you know,
A folk song
Patreon
a
and
day.
other support like crowdfunding sources. I have a page on Ampled where I release original music. And between 2020 and 2021, I released either a new song or a video or a short essay every week. It's a ton of work and it's sort of like almost too expensive to be sustainable, but I think it's a cool model. I think it could be a short-term model.
So let me ask you this, Lizzie. You have all those things already done. I don't know how many you've done, but
Mhm.
how many podcast episodes could you get right now out of existing material that would feature a song, an essay,
Right.
and that work's already mostly done.
True. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, just resharing
Repackage
and
it.
producing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because like I said, I don't think we've really explored all the different ways this sort of instant communication can work for us, especially given what's going on in radio. I mean, when you put out a release, how much does it cost to release to radio?
Like, do you mean to promote to radio stations?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, you spend thousands on radio promotion.
that's right.
Hmm.
You'd spend a fraction of that
Right.
to get it out that way.
Just
And
for
if they're
physical
not buying
product.
it anyway,
Hmm.
right?
There are a couple questions popped up in the chat.
Oh, nice.
I think a couple that reflected on what kind of licensing is necessary if you're using other people's music.
I guess I could just say what I did. I could be breaking the law for all I know. There has been no definitive case that has determined what fair use is yet. My understanding, and I based it again on Cocaine and Rhinestones, because they use less than 30-second clips, no more than 30 seconds. And they call their podcast an educational podcast. And that's really important how you phrase it. So when I tell people what I do with No Root, No Fruit is an educational podcast. And I use no more than 30 seconds of music, but I use them a lot. I'll have 35 clips sometimes in one show. So I guess I'm taking a chance, but I figure if they haven't busted Cocaine and Rhinestones with gets, 1 million downloads, I can't imagine they're going to come
So
after
I
me.
wonder if Cocaine and Rhinestones actually pays for the rights.
They don't. I
Oh,
asked
they
them.
don't? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I figure that's
Yeah.
it's because
And
usually
that's
it's
the
where
truth.
there's money involved is when they'll come after you, but they don't see. I think he's somehow made it an educational, and it's an educational podcast about 20th century country
Right.
music.
I think it would take a lot if you were using copywritten music. I'm not a lawyer, so this is not my legal advice, but it's just my opinion. I don't follow this advice, but I think it would take a lot of money and a lot of years to take like a podcast down, like a regular
Yes.
person's podcast down for using clips of, Stevie Wonder and, Elvis Costello in your podcast. That being said, we don't use music in our podcast unless we've gotten permission from the artists.
Mhm.
And it's usually in my request for promotional materials. I ask them, we like to use a clip of our guests' music in the podcast. Would it be okay to use this particular song? And everyone, for the most part, always says yes or doesn't answer my email. So then I don't use their
Yes.
music. But
And one thing I will say is that if any portion of your podcast is going out on YouTube, they will take it down if there is any music in there. So like
Yeah.
if you want to release a YouTube version, I have even had YouTube take my videos down of my own music
Me
because
too. Yeah.
they think they think I'm a hacker. So that's the one place where you really have to be cautious about using
And I haven't put
music
it out.
yet.
I haven't used YouTube as a way out to do it yet. So for that reason, I think, because I knew they'd probably stress. So like I said, I
Yes.
could be in violation. That's why I do a million other things. If some reason they came after me and said I had to shut it down, then I guess I'd have to shut it down. But
Yes.
right. And it would just be like, take this one episode down. It wouldn't be because it's like artist by artist.
yeah. And if I do
thing.
use an extended track, like I used Cliff Eberhardt, I just did a thing on Richie Havens, and Cliff has a beautiful song called The Long Road that he does with Richie. But when I interviewed Richie, I said, do you mind if I use more than 30 seconds of your song? Of course, nobody's going to say no to that.
What kind of archive life do these podcasts have? I mean, if you're doing educational and informational rather than topical.
Oh, I'd like to think that my show could be, used forever. How long does Buzzsprout keep them out there? How long does the that I don't know. Do you know how long Apple Podcasts keeps
For
so
as
far
long as you're
forever,
paying
right?
For distribution.
Yeah.
And you can store them so that myself as a listener can say, hey, I'm interested in Richie Havens interview, and it's easy to find.
Well, I have a companion website, norootnofruit.com. So all of them are up there too, which is why my numbers aren't always accurate, because I get a fair amount of people who don't download it from Apple but
Right.
they just listen on my website. Do you do that, you guys?
Yes, we put our so we're on a distribution platform now called Red Circle. So we put our Red Circle player, we embed that onto our website. So I think our numbers are pretty accurate.
And same with mine. I just don't know how to interpret them, but I use Bandzoogle, which is a popular musicians website platform. And I picked that just because I figured I could figure out how to make it podcast friendly as well. And it's real easy to embed a player put in pictures. It looks nice, easy to use. So I guess that's another expense. I also use a program called Descript because one of the things I need in order to make, I thought in order to reinforce it as an educational podcast was transcriptions of the scripts.
Mm.
So Descript is a pretty decent, and I'm sure you can do them for free. This one costs like $12 a month, but I just throw the file into Descript and it pops out a transcript. It's like, I've never seen anything save time like that before.
And it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, and it's fairly accurate. You got to go through it, but it's fairly accurate.
Yeah, I imagine there could be some embarrassing moments there with.
Yeah, but there are also, I think, a lot of programs that'll do that for free as well. I don't know how accurate they are, but that's worth. If you're doing a transcript, don't do it yourself, or you'll add another 20 hours a week.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left, so I really want to open this up to the rest of the room.
I think Sue had her hand up for a moment. Sue,
Oh,
did-
good.
Hi, Sue.
Hi. I was just going to make a quick comment about the music being used. This American Life used one of my songs in one of their episodes, and I didn't even know about it till a friend texted me about it.
Mhm.
Then everybody was like, "Oh, are they paying you? Are they paying you?" Like, gosh, I don't know. I don't even know how they got the music. I don't remember sending it to them. So this was like a running joke. And so when I got this weird request through Bandcamp about a year later asking if they could use my permission, I thought it was one of my friends just hoaxing me. So I wrote back this snippy little thing. "Oh, you mean episode 691 that you've already used it?" And then it turned out it was really their music director. I was like, oh no. So then I had to like look up really fast before the guy called me and to find out. And I guess they should have asked me first because they put it like underneath the music. It was an episode about alternate universes and they used my song Alternate Universe. So he was really nice. We came up with a thing and I landed up getting paid for it. But I knew nothing about this beforehand, and it did make me wonder because they just used a little bit of it.
Well, you know, Sue, I don't have to call you to use anything on a CD to play on my show.
Oh, well, no, it shouldn't be on a radio, right?
And This American Life, I think, falls under the Corporation for Public Broadcasting's blanket licensing. That's why a
Is
lot
that
of
for
the
terrestrial?
Podcast also.
that could be just for terrestrial, but I don't know if they've blanketed in a podcast clause or not. They could have.
This was the podcast, so
Yeah.
that's why they did it. So I was like, I mean, yeah, it was a big surprise. But then I started wondering, but like, you know, there's shows, what is it, Card Talk had a podcast, and they always played people's music in it. I don't know if people got paid or
I
how
doubt
that
it.
works.
I doubt it. And I do think it could be blanketed under public radio. I don't know, but I would, that's again, it's so early on in the process that I don't think any of this stuff has been ironed out yet.
Yeah.
Glad you got
It'll take a
paid.
court challenge or
My friends, Split Lip Rayfield, have a song called "Kiss of Death" about a broken down or a guy whose cars always break down, and they used their song on Car Talk, but they weren't asked about it or anything
No.
like that.
That'd be quite a surprise. Peter?
Yeah, I was gonna say I had at least 5 songs on Car Talk, but I sent them the CD, so they had my permission. And then when they put out a compilation CD called Disrespectful Car Songs, they included my song Peugeot on it, and I got copies of the CD, but I never, I knew I was never going to get paid from those guys. And they also used my song as their music on hold for a while, which was kind of cool. But again, I didn't get paid.
That's good to know. Any other questions throughout the room?
I have one other question. You're talking about YouTube. I see a lot of. I watch a lot of YouTube, so I see a lot of things that it would almost be a podcast, except that you can see the people, talking. And so I was wondering, I think you've answered the question about the music rights. I've had my own music taken down, but are those considered podcasts when they're on YouTube or not really? Those are
not my
something.
area. Cindy, do you know anything about that, or Lizzie?
I think they they are podcasts. I think that's kind of building on the thing that we were talking about earlier about how videos and images just reach a wider audience. And I think for a lot of podcasts where they are recording like together in studio, either like multiple hosts or there's a guest, there's kind of like a natural tie-in if they have video capabilities. So I think it's pretty much the same. And a lot of those podcasts do also release the audio. So it seems like that's just like kind of like a parallel way to release a podcast. It's sort of like you're watching, daytime talk TV.
I think I think I get a lot more people willing to talk to me if they know they're not being videoed.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because I just say, you don't have to pretty up or anything. I'm just using audio.
Yes.
You
You're
so
asking more of
actually-
it's a little bit more
Yeah.
of an ask.
Yeah.
YouTube
know-
actually is trying to launch a podcast
Right.
service. So I know what you're talking about. My mom watches like a bunch of like knitting videos that she calls her podcasts. Then she calls them podcasts. I feel like I don't know enough about this situation, but I think it has to have an RSS feed in order for it to be considered a podcast. But like, that's just like from a technical definition. I don't know enough about YouTube podcasting. I only know that it's a thing that they've started this year.
I mean, they used to call them video blogs, did they? Isn't that about kind of the same thing?
Blogs.
Yeah.
Vlog.
Right. Vlogs.
My vlog.
I know when I did my YouTube show, I'd strip the audio and then upload it to what is it, Buzzsprout? So,
Mhm.
and
That's what Matt uses, right?
just to extend the audience a little bit. That was my basic goal, and I figured my video was okay for what we were doing, but it wasn't absolutely necessary. So that's the way I treated that. Where's James? James Eddy, I think, had his hand up. There you are.
Yeah, hi. Just to build on that a little bit, I've been a guest on one podcast, and all they did with theirs is duplicate it. So the exact same audio that they have on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, they have the exact same program without any different editing on YouTube. So some of the people who watch their podcasts just prefer to go, to the computer or to a program to play YouTube, where others prefer it differently. But in that particular instance, there wasn't even any attempt to differentiate. It's just the same thing offered on two different platforms.
Ken?
I think we're going to see a whole bunch of change, like Cindy was just referring to, because I think YouTube is going to be jumping into this world, and we'll find out, how that all shakes out.
Ken?
Hey, Cindy, can you talk a little bit about the bluegrass situation, relationship, and kind of why Basic Folk went that way?
Yeah, so the Bluegrass Situation has a podcast network where they have about half a dozen podcasts. Basic Folk had been on a couple of podcast networks previously, and there were some pretty good advantages to being on a network, including the network would pay for the distribution fee, as well as give marketing support and also further solidify like the folk brand, and it just makes Basic Folk like a more legitimate, trustworthy entity. So we've been with Bluegrass Situation, I think, for about a year and a half. I can't remember when we launched with them, but it's been a really great relationship, really wonderful. There have been some advertising opportunities that have come about, but that's not the main reason why we're with BGS. I just can't say enough good things about them. Is there anything, Ken, specifically that you wanted to know other than that?
No, I was just kind of curious why you'd signed up for it and what the advantages were. So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the podcast network, which might be, I've heard that term in the past, but I don't know how familiar people really are with those, or that there are podcast networks.
It's kind of like it's kind of like a boutique label type of situation where they're not like paying us to make content. We're not paying them. They're supporting us in a couple of different ways. It's a jungle out there, so it's nice to be part of a network, but it shouldn't deter you if you aren't and you want to start your own podcast and you're not part of a podcast network.
I guess that would be sort of like the Netflix idea we just had, is that, this Bluegrass Situation has a bunch of podcasts that have, similar things going on. And did you have any special requirements to be with them? I don't think they'd ever ask you to do anything with your content or change anything, right?
No, yeah, and that was like a huge stipulation with any
Right.
network that, we're the ones that are controlling the content of the podcast. We can say no to any advertising opportunity. And there are also some technical things I was looking for in their podcast distributor. So we haven't gotten into this, and it looks like we're at about time, but there are advertisement spots or promotional spots in your podcast. There's a pre-roll, there's a mid-roll, and a post-roll. Everybody forget about the post-roll because no one cares unless you're the Daily or Joe Rogan. But the mid-roll is the spot that if you're going to make any money, or if you're going to get a lot of people listening to that particular time in your podcast, it's the mid-roll. So there are a couple of stipulations that I wanted in our distribution platform. And some of that had to do with being able to like insert pre-rolls and mid-rolls without having to like edit them into the podcast. So if Lizzie and I were doing any fundraising messages for the month of October, we just want those promotional messages to air during October, and then the rest of the year there can be another message there, or there can be nothing. Deep dive into marketing. Sorry about that.
And I think most of the distribution places are starting to offer those kinds of things where you can just insert them like that. I haven't
Yeah.
explored that, but I just saw that they were offering that.
Yes, yeah, and it's great once you get into that. If you're a real marketer and you want another messaging.
And I also agree about,
platform,
I really love what Cindy had to say about doing this because you love it. I mean, I think none of us in folk music should be a stranger to that concept, right? I mean, we do this because it's our passion, it's our love. And I agree. I mean, for me, because it's also my work, I do need to get at least paid for my time, but I'm not looking to get rich in podcasts, that's for sure. But it is a nice
great
little,
to not go broke doing your podcast.
yeah, I just don't want to go broke.
That's the charm of folk music. Let's give Sue the last question.
Thanks. You guys, some of you know I'm still back in the 1900s. So when you're talking about downloading I listen to podcasts on my computer while I'm doing other things. I know people walk down the street and they're downloading. What do you download it onto? What is that how you know if people listen only if they download?
Yes. So that's one of the ways. On iTunes, it's not iTunes, it's on do you have an iPhone? I think on Android it's the same.
I have an
There's
iPhone. Yeah.
There's the podcast app. It's like a little purple decal with a microphone on it, and you can search for the name of the podcast you want, or you can search a topic you're interested in. Yeah, that purple little icon.
Oh.
And then you can either just hit play, or you can download a bunch of episodes in a row. That's what I do on a road trip. I'll download a bunch of episodes so I can kind of do a deep dive on a topic.
You don't have to download, you can stream as well. But if you're going on an airplane and you want to listen to a podcast, you can download it, and then you don't need internet connection. And Apple Podcasts is like the number one place that people listen, but people also listen on Spotify, which I think has a better interface, but also it's an evil company.
Yes.
And Stitcher is another good one that people listen on. If you have an Android, Google has a podcast player. TuneIn, also a good place to listen.
Yeah, Sue, if you like I said, if you click on that purple icon, search Basic Folk, you're listening within 30 seconds.
Thank you, guys. I'm so embarrassed that I even asked that. But
No, in fact,
Don't be embarrassed.
don't
This
be,
is-
because
this is
that brings up
huge.
another point about what I'm going to do. It occurs to me that there are a lot of people who are not tech savvy who want to hear my podcast. I want to go on. I'm going to do a YouTube hi, everybody, here's how you do it. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who just need to be tutored on it. That's all.
A great idea. Thank you. Well, with that, please hit your little purple icon and go subscribe to Basic Folk and No Root, No Fruit. I want to sincerely thank Lizzie No, Cindy Howe, and Matt Wetruba for joining us today. Originally, Annie Caps was supposed to be our moderator, and I stepped in last minute. And one thing that was very encouraging to me was that you all are professional speakers. I really didn't have to do very much. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge and experience, and just being yourselves, because I think that's a big part of what these podcasts are, is that we get to spend time with people that we're getting to know.
I do want to say that I've saved the chat, but if anyone in here wants any further information from me, please just email me. I'll be more than happy to. I encourage creativity on every level. This is a creative thing to do, and it's fun, and I'd be happy to help inspire you to do it.
Yeah, email Matt. Just kidding.
Yeah.
You can also email me.
And real quickly to close out, I want to thank our virtual connections team from Folk Alliance Region Midwest. Our team is Annie Caps, Smith, Karen Rigoti, and Alexa Dawson. And with that, I'm going to hand the microphone to Alexa, who's going to give us a few announcements about upcoming farm events, virtual connections events, and then thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really awesome, demystifying this thing called podcasting, and then I love the spirit behind it, the people's messages getting out. So that's amazing. Thank you for what you do, and I can't wait to start listening to your podcasts. Yes, we have a couple things coming up this week. Tomorrow is our folk DJ peer session, so join the folk DJs if you wish. If you want more information about that, or Thursday's Performance Lane, which is sort of a pre-scheduled open mic that is 2 hours long in the evening, and we all kind of kick back and just enjoy listening to a lot of new artists. All that information is going to be on our Virtual Connections page at farmfolkfai.com. Did I say that right?
Farmfolk.org.
Farmfolk.org. Thank you. Also, we are getting ready for the conference in October, and that means that we are accepting ideas for workshops. So if you have topics or panels that you would like to get together on when we are in Lisle in October, let us know your ideas. Also, it's time to go ahead and sign up for a private showcase room if you would like to host. And there was one more thing about it. Oh, and we're accepting award nominations. So if you are already registered, thanks for registering. We've had a really great turnout so far this year. If you haven't registered, please do get registered. Tell a friend about Farm Gathering. It's a really great, it's a great event to be at. So if you haven't been, please do consider coming. And I think that is all from us. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us on Zoom and on Facebook and everywhere else. Share this with a friend who might be interested in podcasting or who might need to know about these awesome podcasts that we should be listening to. So thanks so much, everyone. Hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
All right. Yeah. So thank
Okay.
you. Thanks, Alexa. Went great.
Yeah. Thanks, Charlie.
Okay. I've got a gig to go do now.
All right. Hustle.
It's a busking gig outside the ballpark. So that's
Oh, is it hot up there?
yeah, it's about 80 degrees. But there's a threat of rain. That's the big concern.
We've got a week in the 90s, which is like the worst that we've had so far. So we're all kind of complaining about it, but good luck. Have fun.
Thanks. Okay, I'll see you later.